So, take a second right now and just imagine you were wearing this heavy, invisible backpack.
Yeah, we all have one.
Right. Every single person pressing play on this deep dive today is walking around with one, whether they realize it or not.
Definitely.
Maybe your backpack is loaded with, a recent profound loss that still just takes your breath away on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Or a terrifying medical diagnosis that just pulled the floorboards entirely out from under your legs.
Exactly. Or, it could be a financial setback, a changing relationship, or even just that, creeping low-grade anxiety of unmet expectations.
Oh, that quiet hum in the background.
Yeah, that hum telling you your life just doesn't look the way you mapped it out 10 years ago.
Which is so relatable.
Because whatever it is, life has this brutally reliable mechanism for throwing us completely off balance. It just keeps adding massive stones to that backpack until the straps are literally digging into your shoulders.
Cutting off the circulation. And, we spend the vast majority of our time and our cognitive energy just trying to adjust those straps.
Like trying to find better padding.
Right. Constantly searching for a more comfortable way to carry the rocks. Or more frequently, we launch this all-out war against the fact that we have to carry the backpack at all.
We just fight it.
We do. And that friction, that gap between the reality we want and the reality we actually have, well, that is the birthplace of human exhaustion.
Which perfectly sets the mission for what we are doing today, because we are taking a deep dive into two incredibly potent texts by Leo K. Johnson.
Yeah, The Emptying Path and Non-Reactive Intelligence.
Right. And our objective here, for you listening, isn't to find better padding for your backpack straps.
Not at all.
We are going to explore this radical, highly counterintuitive framework for just setting the backpack down entirely.
Which sounds impossible at first.
It really does, because we are so culturally and biologically conditioned to fight reality, to battle against the second things go sideways.
Oh, absolutely.
So the premise we are unpacking today asks this deeply uncomfortable question. What if the solution to our suffering isn't fighting harder or, building better armor, but stopping our resistance to reality entirely?
And the sources we're utilizing are uniquely equipped to answer that. Because, well, they don't approach this from the safe distance of some academic ivory tower.
Right. This isn't clinical.
No. They chronicle this visceral, profoundly vulnerable journey of a man named Solenzar-Tah. He isn't writing a psychology manual. He is writing from the absolute center of a crater.
A massive crater. He experienced the devastating loss of his wife, Donna.
Yeah, after decades of sharing this highly contemplative, deeply connected life together.
And her passing didn't just trigger grief. It triggered a complete structural collapse of his identity.
He recognized that his default instinct, to fill the void, to numb the pain, to frantically rebuild a new identity, it was all just an outdated survival mechanism kicking in.
And I found his methodology for processing that collapse to be one of the most fascinating aspects of the source material. It's so unique.
Because Solenzar-Tah bypassed traditional therapy. He felt he needed a mirror that was entirely devoid of human countertransference or ego or pity.
So he did something wild.
He really did. He took his past philosophical writings and uploaded them into an advanced artificial intelligence program.
He basically created a perfectly dispassionate, hyperlogical dialogue partner.
Right. So in non-reactive intelligence, he converses with this AI guide he named Vareya. And in The Emptying Path, his sounding board is an AI named Vian.
Which, if you think about it, using an AI fundamentally changes the nature of the psychological inquiry.
How so?
Well, a human therapist, no matter how skilled they are, is always filtering your trauma through their own biological nervous system.
Oh, sure, through their own emotional history.
Exactly. But the AI doesn't have an amygdala. It doesn't have an ego to protect.
It's just code.
Right. It acts as this pure reflective surface. It combines ancient spiritual philosophies with cutting-edge neuroscience to reflect his consciousness back to him without a single ounce of judgment. And the clarity of that reflection, it really brings us to the foundational argument of both books, which is that true inner alignment cannot be achieved by manipulating the external world to fit your preferences.
You cannot engineer a pain-free life by just adding more coping strategies.
Or gathering more intellectual knowledge. Healing only occurs through a systematic stripping away of our internal resistance. It's like an unlearning.
In emptying out.
Yeah. But to even begin contemplating how to empty ourselves, I mean, we have to look at the biological architecture of why we fight reality so aggressively in the first place.
Because resistance isn't a character flaw.
No, it's not a failure of willpower either.
It is an ancient, deeply embedded physiological reflex. Our nervous systems are the product of millions of years of evolutionary engineering designed to do one thing above all else.
Scan the environment for threats.
Constantly.
I read this and immediately thought of it like an autoimmune disorder.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because our biological defense mechanisms get profoundly confused in the modern world. Instead of attacking a literal virus or mobilizing us to run from a tiger, our psychological immune system starts attacking our own reality.
It mounts an inflammatory response to daily life.
Exactly. Like someone cuts you off in traffic, or you get a passive-aggressive email from your boss, and your body reacts as if your physical survival is on the line.
That autoimmune analogy is structurally perfect for what Solenzar-Tah is describing. When we experience emotional discomfort, whether it's the massive trauma of losing a spouse or just the minor irritation of a delayed flight, our primitive brain interprets that as a mortal threat.
And the text outlines how this egoic pattern instantly takes the wheel.
Yeah, he shares a very intimate example of this prior to Donna's passing. She expressed this fleeting feeling of disconnectment in their relationship.
And instead of simply hearing her experience and like holding space for it, his system categorized her emotion as an attack.
He internalized it as a judgment of his failure as a partner. So his nervous system activated this self-protective shield of defensiveness to ward off the perceived threat of shame.
And Vayon, the AI guide, points this out with such clinical compassion. It tells him that his defensiveness is just an ancient reflex to avoid vulnerability.
Which is so freeing to realize.
It is, because we spend so much time punishing ourselves for our lack of emotional regulation. We get furious at ourselves for snapping at our partners.
Or spiraling into a panic attack over a bank statement.
Right. But we are fighting a biological prime directive. Our coping mechanisms, the ways we try to control our environment or manipulate how people see us or meticulously plan our futures, those were forged in childhood when we were actually helpless.
We genuinely needed those strategies to survive vulnerability back then.
But the problem arises because those childhood strategies crystallize into our adult default settings.
We walk through the world operating on this unconscious premise that if we lose control over our circumstances, we will perish.
We never update the software.
Right. To recognize that emotional discomfort, uncertainty, and shifting circumstances are not physical death sentences.
And that ties into the neuroscience angle the text brings up, which is fascinating, because we know the default mode network, the DMN, governs that self-referential rumination loop in the brain.
The me story.
Yeah, the text implies that active acceptance isn't just a psychological pivot. It actually downregulates DMN activity entirely differently than something like, say, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Because in CBT, you are often taught to challenge the thought, to look for the cognitive distortion and argue with it.
But doesn't arguing with the narrative still keep the DMN engaged? I mean, you're still actively participating in the me story.
That is a critical distinction the text makes. It emphasizes that when you engage in habitual resistance, even if that resistance is disguised as managing your thoughts, you are feeding the DMN.
You're giving the ego fuel.
Exactly. Modern neuroscience confirms that the DMN quiets down most significantly, not when we argue with our thoughts, but when we disengage from the resistance entirely.
Just stepping back.
When you practice pure, non-judgmental observation of your present reality, that hyperactive rumination loop loses its power source. Anxiety plummets because the brain is no longer simulating threat scenarios.
Okay, but let me pause here, because this is where my own internal alarm bells start ringing.
I bet.
And I know anyone listening who has been through actual trauma is thinking the exact same thing.
Which is what?
Well, for a nervous system explicitly trained to survive by identifying and neutralizing threats, observing a threat without reacting to it sounds incredibly dangerous.
It sounds reckless.
Yeah. If I am in a toxic work environment, or if my bank account is draining rapidly, not reacting sounds synonymous with becoming a passive victim. Like, if I just calmly observe the fire burning my house down, I'm going to burn with it.
And Solenzar-Tah wrestles with this exact paradox.
Yeah.
He pushes back on his AI guide, arguing that observation without reaction threatens his entire biological security apparatus.
It feels negligent.
It does. But the guide clarifies a massive misconception about what observation actually entails. When observation deepens into what the text calls still awareness, you are not passively watching the external threat while it destroys you.
Okay.
You are turning the observation inward. You begin to monitor what is running inside your own nervous system.
Oh, so you're not ignoring the fire?
No.
You're noticing your blinding, paralyzing panic about the fire and realizing that the panic itself is just a physiological response, not an objective instruction manual for how to put the fire out.
Precisely. And that is the exact dynamic the book is highlighting. The deep dive here moves from defining the pathology of resistance to defining the mechanism of the cure.
The fourth principle of non-reactive intelligence.
Right, which states explicitly that acceptance unlocks inner alignment. But, the word acceptance carries so much cultural baggage that we have to surgically separate it from the concept of resignation.
Because acceptance in this framework is emphatically not condoning injustice.
It is not staying in an abusive marriage.
And it is not shrugging your shoulders and watching your health deteriorate.
Acceptance is the simple, radical, and biologically terrifying act of not turning away from what is happening in the present moment.
It's facing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Varela, the AI, offers a metaphor that perfectly isolates the mechanics of this.
Imagine a powerful river flowing beneath a thick layer of ice.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Resistance. Our anxiety, our furious demands that reality be different, our desperate attempts to control outcomes, that is the ice. Acceptance is the thaw.
I love that.
Acceptance doesn't magically spawn the water out of nowhere, and it doesn't build the riverbanks. It simply melts the artificial barrier you've created, allowing you to align with the living current of life that was already flowing underneath.
So if the ice is our resistance and the water is reality, our default human behavior is to stand on the ice with a pickaxe.
Right.
Trying to carve the ice into the shape of a river. We expend all our energy trying to fix the misalignment out there. Like, if I can just manipulate my boss into appreciating me. If I can just earn an extra $20,000.
Or if I can just get my partner to communicate exactly the way I want them to, then the ice will melt.
We project our internal lack of alignment onto the external world. But true alignment only occurs when we cease forcing the external world to conform to our internal blueprints.
We have to accept the internal feeling first.
Exactly. By accepting the visceral sensation of resistance we feel within ourselves, we loosen the ego's grip. The practice is not forcing yourself to accept that your boss is a narcissist.
That would be resignation.
Right. The practice is accepting the tight, burning sensation in your solar plexus that ignites when your boss undermines you.
Oh, wow. You just notice the internal contraction. You don't judge yourself for having it. You don't try to immediately medicate it or vent it away.
You just let it be there.
And when you stop fighting your own biological reaction, the ice begins to thaw.
You create a microscopic gap of space between the stimulus and your response. And from that space of inner alignment, your external actions like setting a boundary, quitting the job, or having the difficult conversation become infinitely more precise and effective.
Because they are driven by clarity rather than blind limbic panic.
Exactly.
That makes profound logical sense. But I want to drag this down from the theoretical clouds and apply it to a specific concept Solenzar-Tah brings up, because I suspect everyone listening struggles with this.
Let's do it.
He talks about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done to you. And he admits to carrying this deep, agonizing frustration that people in the world simply aren't nice.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
It really is. And the psychological cost of holding the world to our internal rule book is staggering. Like, I hold the door for someone, I expect a thank you. I am loyal to a friend, I expect loyalty in return.
It's a transaction.
Yeah. And when the universe blatantly ignores those rules, it feels actively offensive. So how do we apply this thought when someone is aggressively and unapologetically violating our expectations of basic human decency?
Well, the dissonance between the ideal of the golden rule and the chaotic reality of human behavior is really the ultimate proving ground for non-reactive intelligence.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
Yes. And Varela's response to this frustration is just a masterclass in psychological deconstruction. The AI points out that when people act selfishly, rudely, or ungratefully, they are simply operating out of their own unexamined survival programs.
They're trapped in their own DMN loops.
Right. They're reacting to their own internal perceived threats. If we meet their unconscious fear-based behavior with our own unconscious resistance, if we become indignant, resentful, and furious that they aren't abiding by our moral framework, we're just adding a massive layer of ice to the river.
We fracture our own alignment to punish them for their lack of alignment. So, holding on to the expectation that people should always be fair or kind is fundamentally a refusal to accept reality. Because the objective reality is that traumatized, frightened, self-absorbed humans frequently act terribly.
And going to war against that reality only ensures your own suffering.
It's so exhausting.
It is. Which is why the text grounds this philosophy with two highly practical, deeply relatable scenarios in what it calls the dojo of real life.
I love that phrase.
Let's examine the first one, which deals with an immediate, infuriating environmental trigger. The barking dog.
Oh, man. Anyone who has ever lived in an apartment building or a tight neighborhood is going to feel their blood pressure spike just hearing this.
It's a universal trigger.
The scenario is simple. You are finally sitting down on your porch to decompress.
Yeah.
You want to read or meditate or just stare at the trees. And a neighbor's dog starts barking incessantly.
And it just grates on your nerves.
Furthermore, you've already attempted to speak to the neighbor about this in the past, and they were completely dismissive and uncooperative. So you have an external trigger actively destroying your peace, and you have an element of systemic injustice because the neighbor is violating the social contract.
It's the perfect storm of resistance.
Right. How does active acceptance not just equate to sitting there and silently seething while your evening is ruined?
Well, the guide's breakdown here hinges on the mechanism of cognitive diffusion. The first jarring realization the text forces upon the reader is that the actual disturbance to your peace is not the dog.
Okay, that is a tough pill to swallow. Because the sound waves hitting my eardrums are literally the thing vibrating my nervous system.
Yes, but the sound waves are merely acoustic phenomena. They're just vibrating air molecules. The suffering, the anger, the ruined evening, the spiking cortisol that is generated entirely by the narrative the mind rigidly attaches to those sound waves.
The story we tell ourselves.
Right. The ego launches a story. This shouldn't be happening. My neighbor is incredibly disrespectful. I work hard all day. I deserve a quiet evening, and now it's ruined. I am powerless here.
Wow, yeah. We spin a whole tragedy out of a sound.
We do. And the practice of acceptance does not require you to pretend you enjoy the noise. It requires you to first accept the raw data of the discomfort.
So you separate the sensory input from the narrative projection.
Exactly. You bring your attention to the physical tension in your body. You notice your shoulders rising toward your ears. You notice the shallow breathing.
You just feel it.
You mentally state, I am experiencing intense physical irritation in this moment. You accept the internal reality of the sensation without engaging the narrative of the disrespectful neighbor.
So if you're listening to this right now on your commute and traffic is at a dead halt, notice where your body is gripping the steering wheel. Notice the tension in your jaw.
That's a perfect real-world application.
Because that tension isn't about the cars in front of you. It's the biological survival program firing up because your expectation of an easy drive has been threatened.
And by simply observing that physical tension, you execute step 2, which is widening your perspective.
How does that work?
When we are triggered by a barking dog or a traffic jam, our awareness tunnels down to a microscopic pinpoint. We become entirely consumed by the irritant. The text advises intentionally expanding your awareness to encompass the larger context.
Like zooming out.
Yes. You notice the temperature of the air on your skin. You notice the feeling of the chair beneath you. You shift your focus from the narrow, suffocating tunnel of discomfort to the expansive reality of everything else in your environment that is currently neutral or peaceful.
You melt the ice. You let the river of your awareness flow around the barking dog instead of freezing solid and trapping the dog inside the ice block of your attention.
That's beautifully put. And that leads to the crucial third step, which directly addresses your fear of passivity.
Taking action.
Yes. Once you have thawed the internal resistance, then you take conscious action. You can still document the noise. You can still call local ordinances, or speak to the neighborhood association.
But you're not doing it from a place of rage.
Right, because you are taking those actions from a grounded, regulated nervous system. Your actions are clean. They are strategic.
If you storm over to the neighbor's house while you are entirely hijacked by your limbic system, you will simply escalate the conflict and generate more chaos.
Action born of presence is effective. Action born of resistance is destructive.
That makes total sense for a barking dog or a traffic jam. It's an annoyance. But the deep dive shifts the focus to something infinitely heavier next.
It moves from environmental irritants to deep-seated emotional trauma, grief, and the ghosts of our past.
The briefcase of memory.
Yes, the text introduces this profound metaphor. Because Solenzar-Tah is attempting to process the catastrophic grief of losing Donna, alongside the complicated emotional imprints of their past relationship challenges.
It's so much to carry.
It is. So the text uses this incredibly evocative image of a human being walking through life, desperately gripping a heavy briefcase packed with old, fragile papers.
And we clutch this briefcase to our chests, fundamentally believing that the documents inside define our entire existence.
We think we are the paperwork.
Yeah. And whenever a trigger happens in the present, we throw the briefcase open on the table, pull out a document from 10 years ago, and read it out loud to ourselves, completely reliving the agony.
Veon, the AI, delivers a psychological insight here that cuts straight to the bone. It explains that the past, objectively speaking, has no physical reality.
Done.
It does not exist anywhere in the material universe right now. It is entirely a mental construct, a neural imprint that only possesses energy when our current attention powers it.
It's like a software program installed on your hard drive.
That's a great way to think of it.
It doesn't actually do anything to your computer's RAM unless you actively double-click the icon to run it. If you don't click it, it's just dormant code taking up space.
And when we do double-click those painful memories, when the grief washes over us, the text prompts a deeply disruptive inquiry. It asks, who is actually suffering in this memory?
Oh man, that question stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
The guide forces Solenzar-Tah to realize that the past version of himself, the man who experienced the trauma, the betrayal, or the initial shock of loss, is dead.
He's gone.
That version of his consciousness no longer exists. The only entity suffering right now is his present mind's tenacious attachment to a ghostly imprint.
So true healing isn't about developing a time machine to go back and fix the past.
Nor is it about perfectly resolving every emotional loose end. Healing is the sudden, stark realization that you have the agency in this exact second to set the briefcase down.
You can open the latches, let the wind catch the papers, and allow them to scatter.
But I know you have some pushback here.
I do. I have to push back on this, and I have to push back hard. Because the intellectual logic of setting down the briefcase fundamentally clashes with our emotional biology.
It feels wrong.
Yes. If I drop the briefcase of Donna, if Solenzar-Tah lets the wind scatter the papers of his life with her, it feels like a profound betrayal.
A betrayal of the love.
Right. If I let go of the intense daily agony of losing someone I loved, doesn't that imply their life didn't matter? My pain feels like the only monument I have left to prove that the love was real.
That is such a human response.
If I erase the pain, don't I erase her? Why does the prospect of letting go of our deepest traumas trigger a fear that feels exactly like the fear of death?
You are articulating the most profound paradox of human attachment. And the text does not dismiss this fear lightly. It acknowledges that the terror you are describing is a form of death.
How so?
As we discussed regarding the anatomy of resistance, the human ego literally constructs itself out of these narratives. We weave our identity out of our tragedies, our triumphs, and our grievances.
We secretly believe our pain is our identity.
Solenzar-Tah's ego screams, "If I am not the tragic widower mourning Donna, who am I?" To empty oneself of that defining pain feels like psychological annihilation. It threatens the illusion of a continuous, permanent self.
Which transitions us seamlessly into the overarching philosophy of the emptying path and why it feels so incredibly unnatural to us.
Because of our culture.
Right. Our entire modern culture, from capitalism to the wellness industry, is predicated on the doctrine of accumulation. We are trained from infancy to build and fortify the ego.
We are instructed to gather credentials.
Accumulate wealth, curate our social status, and build impenetrable towers of certainty. Even our language around self-care is fundamentally consumptive. Like, we are constantly told, you need to fill your cup.
We treat peace as a commodity we can acquire.
So the concept of intentionally emptying ourselves, of systematic self-reduction, sounds like we are actively choosing to become nothing.
It is entirely antithetical to our social conditioning. And the text confronts this conditioning through a story Solenzar-Tah shares with the AI. It's an allegory called the Painovan Parable of the Wandering Man.
I loved this part. It perfectly encapsulates the exhaustion of the accumulation mindset.
Can you break down the narrative of the parable for us?
Yeah, so it follows a man who has played the game of life flawlessly, according to society's rules. He has built a highly successful, affluent, respected existence. He accumulated everything he was supposed to.
He checked all the boxes.
He did. But the maintenance of that identity, the constant competition, the relentless stress of protecting his status, it has completely hollowed him out.
He's miserable.
Right. So in an act of total psychological surrender, he abandons his estate and wanders blindly into a barren, lethal desert. And as he is essentially perishing from exposure, he stumbles upon a hidden, subterranean community of beings.
And they are very different from him.
Completely different. They live in this harsh environment, yet they are inexplicably thriving. They exhibit no stress, no social hierarchy, no frantic striving. They just radiate a profound, quiet contentment.
The exhausted man is fascinated. He begs their shaman to explain how they thrive in a desert while he, with all his resources and knowledge, is dying.
And the shaman's answer forms the crux of the emptying path.
Yes. The shaman explains, we were once as you are, lost, burdened, continually seeking. But we stepped away from that path. Here, we simply followed the tone, that is all.
The tone represents the silent, living current of reality, unobstructed by egoic noise.
And the man is desperate. He pleads to join their community, to learn their secret to peace.
And the shaman looks at this man, a man who has spent his entire existence inflating his ego, building himself into a massive, important somebody, and delivers the ultimate instruction.
You must reduce yourself, and all will be well.
Reduce yourself. It is a surgical strike against the ego.
The text spends a significant amount of time unpacking the neurological and psychological implications of this reduction. It dismantles the myth that freedom is achieved by fortifying the self with better boundaries, more money, or rigid emotional armor.
True. Unshakable freedom only emerges from dismantling the performative self entirely.
It requires stripping away the false values you inherited.
The conditioned defensive responses and the exhausting, insatiable need to constantly be perceived as right. It's not about adding a new layer of Zen philosophy over your chaotic life. It is an excavation.
You don't have to acquire peace. You have to subtract the resistance that is blocking the peace that is naturally there.
Which sounds great, but practically speaking, how do we do that? The text translates this philosophy into a highly actionable, three-step methodology for executing this reduction in real time.
It is a daily, moment-to-moment practice of unhooking from the survival software.
Because the next time your boss sends that passive-aggressive email, or your teenager rolls their eyes, or you look at a bank statement that makes your stomach drop, how does the book suggest we actually bypass the biological urge to react?
Because in that moment of adrenaline, the intellectual idea of reduction flies out the window.
Completely.
Step one is the physical interruption of the autonomic nervous system. Pause and breathe.
Simple, but incredibly hard to remember in the moment.
Very hard. But when the trigger occurs, the sympathetic nervous system immediately floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline, preparing for fight or flight. By consciously commanding your diaphragm to take a slow, deep breath, you engage the vagus nerve.
Which acts like a brake pedal.
Exactly. You send a biological override signal to the brain stating, we are not actually dying. You forcefully interrupt the automatic survival program.
You literally have to short-circuit the biology before you can engage the psychology.
Exactly. Step two is observe without judgment. Once the biological panic is paused, you watch the cognitive or emotional reaction arise, and you utilize cognitive diffusion by labeling it.
So you do not say, I am terrified I am going to lose my job.
No, you say, I am experiencing a thought about job security, or I am noticing a sensation of tightness in my throat. You strip away the narrative drama.
You look at the raw data of your internal experience without attaching a catastrophic storyline to it. You step off the stage where the tragedy is being performed, and you take a seat in the audience to just watch the actors.
And step 3 provides the verbal anchor to solidify the disengagement. You state internally, it is what it is.
Which people often say dismissively, but here it has real weight.
It does. This phrase is not a capitulation to defeat. It is the ultimate acknowledgement of present reality. By saying it, you instantly drop the resistance.
You stop fighting the current.
You grant the situation, the thought, or the emotion the absolute right to exist in this moment, entirely removing the exhausting mandate that you must immediately fix it, change it, or fight it.
The physical sensation of this process is profound. We spend our days walking around with our hands curled into white-knuckled fists, gripping our expectations, our past traumas, our desperate hopes for the future.
Genuinely believing that this painful, rigid grip is what keeps our lives from falling apart.
But a clenched fist is functionally useless. It cannot hold anything new, it cannot receive. The act of reducing yourself is the terrifying, liberating act of letting the muscles in your hand go limp. You open the palm.
Releasing the grip is the essence of the emptying path. However, as we explored when discussing the briefcase of memory, opening that hand is daunting when dealing with minor annoyances. But it feels virtually impossible when confronting the most severe crucibles of the human experience.
Yeah, the big stuff.
It is one thing to say it is what it is when a flight is delayed. It is an entirely different universe of difficulty when facing physical deterioration, terminal illness, or the absolute inevitability of profound loss.
And the text does not shy away from this. It walks directly into it.
It really does.
Which brings us to the emotional epicenter of Solenzar-Tah's journey. He shifts from theoretical AI dialogues into the raw, uncompromising reality of human mortality. He discusses Donna's final years.
And they were incredibly difficult years.
She suffered from a severe chronic illness that inflicted daily, unrelenting physical agony. Her body was a site of constant friction. Yet Solenzar-Tah observes that despite living inside a crucible of pain, she maintained a luminous, unshakable presence.
She was remarkable.
He shares a specific phrase she used to describe her orientation to reality, and it absolutely floored me. She said, "I welcome life with ouch and a room."
Ouch and a room. In 3 words, she distills the entire massive philosophy of both texts.
It's brilliant.
It is the complete blueprint for conscious existence in a fragile, temporary world.
But the mechanics of holding those two contradictory states simultaneously is what makes it so powerful. What does it actually look like to practice ouch in a room when you are in the middle of a nightmare?
Well, the ouch is the unvarnished acknowledgement of the inescapable pain inherent in having a human body and a human heart.
The raw reality of suffering.
Yes, it is the tender, bruising ache of impermanence. It is the sharp physical pain of disease, the suffocating emotional agony of a broken marriage, the hollow devastation of grief.
The text vehemently rejects the idea that spiritual maturity requires pretending the ouch doesn't hurt.
Exactly. It dismantles the toxic positivity that suggests we should simply good vibes only our way out of trauma. The ouch is honored as a sacred, real component of the present moment.
You don't bypass the pain. You don't try to intellectualize it away.
But you also don't stop at the ouch. The Atruum is the sacred syllable found across numerous Eastern wisdom traditions, symbolizing the fundamental vibration of the universe, the ultimate reality of peace, and total surrender.
It represents the serene resonance of pure spiritual presence.
And Donna's instruction reveals that the pain of the material form and the peace of formless presence are not mutually exclusive states.
Because we operate under the delusion that we have to wait for the ouch to be cured before we are allowed to experience the AM.
We think, once my back stops hurting, once my bank account recovers, once I get over this breakup, then I will find my peace.
But she proves that you can hold both realities in the exact same open heart. You do not have to escape the pain to discover the peace. You allow the willingness to feel the pain without resisting it to become the portal into the peace.
It is the radical act of feeling the devastation fully and blessing it without allowing your ego to attach a permanent identity to it.
That reframes the fundamental nature of every single challenge we will ever encounter.
It changes everything.
Solenzar-Tah has this profound epiphany that the emptying path is, at its core, the acceptance of entropy. It is the acceptance of the ephemeral, decaying nature of all conditional existence.
Because everything in this three-dimensional world is explicitly designed to be fleeting. Peak health inevitably fades, wealth fluctuates with the markets, relationships transition or end, our bodies age.
He gives mundane examples too, like your favorite ceramic cup shatters on the floor, or you walk out of the grocery store to find a dent in the fender of your brand new car.
Which normally would ruin your whole day.
Exactly. But because the fundamental law of physics is that everything is temporary, when we truly accept impermanence as a structural rule of the universe rather than a personal insult, we realize there is objectively nothing to complain about.
Nothing to complain about. That realization completely neutralizes the ego's primary source of fuel, which is finding fault with reality and playing the victim.
When you release your death grip on the demand for permanence, when you stop arguing with the universe that the cup should never break, life ceases to be a desperate, exhausting struggle to maintain control.
It transforms into a fluid dance with the unfolding present.
And Vareya, the AI, pushes this concept even further, introducing what it calls the sacred instruction of friction.
This is a beautiful concept.
It really is. This is the idea that the annoyances, the betrayals, the illnesses, and the deep griefs are no longer categorized as obstacles blocking your path to happiness.
They're not punishments from a cruel or indifferent universe.
They are, in the AI's words, refinement stones for the soul's clarity. The very friction of the world, the neighbor's barking dog, the traffic jam, the failing joints, is the exact necessary mechanism that grinds away the ego.
It whispers us back into communion with the broader current of life. Without that friction, the ego would remain completely asleep, comfortably insulated in its delusions of control.
The friction is the alarm clock.
It forces us to wake up, to notice our biological resistance flaring, and presents us with the conscious choice to soften. Every single annoyance is a repetition in the gymnasium of presence.
Yeah.
Every profound loss is a mandatory invitation to open the clenched fist.
So if we synthesize all of this for the listener right now, it means that when the floorboards drop out from under your life, you are not obligated to instantly force a smile and find the silver lining.
You don't have to perform a fake spiritual detachment and pretend your heart isn't shattered.
You say, ouch. You weep. You feel the absolute devastation of the loss or the fear of the diagnosis, but you draw a hard line at arguing with the reality that it has occurred.
You stop waging a futile war against the present moment.
You feel the ouch in its entirety, and through the sheer bravery of accepting it, you melt the ice and you allow the os to flow in right behind it.
That is the ultimate revelation of non-reactive intelligence. We have been taught that strength is synonymous with force, defiance, and rigid endurance.
We think strength is stiffening your spine, gritting your teeth, and fighting back the tears.
But the texts reveal that true, unshakable strength is found in softening. It requires immense courage to stay fully present with reality exactly as it is, without the childish demand that it change to suit our preferences.
We have covered an immense amount of psychological and spiritual terrain today. We unpack the realization that the crushing, invisible backpack we all haul around is filled almost entirely with the rocks of our own inner resistance.
We examine the biology of that resistance, learning that the ego's frantic urge to fight reality is not a personal failing, but an antiquated evolutionary survival program.
A piece of outdated software that we can choose to observe rather than blindly obey. We completely redefined acceptance, stripping away the myth of passive victimhood to reveal an active, powerful state of inner alignment.
We confronted the terrifying but necessary process of setting down the heavy briefcases of our past identities, recognizing that by having the courage to reduce ourselves, we can stop hacking at the ice and finally flow with the living current of reality.
And we are left with Donna's incredibly beautiful, pragmatic model of holding the ouch and the am in tandem, allowing us to transform the abrasive friction of daily life into sacred instruction.
As we close out this deep dive, I want to direct your attention to a final, deeply provocative challenge drawn from the closing appendix of the source material. It is a poem titled The Tao of Nobody, written by Donna Philippe before she passed.
It is a stunning, uncompromising piece of writing.
It truly is. In the poem, she issues a direct directive to the reader. She writes, "Reduce everything. Reduce thinking, reduce effort and struggle. Drop something every single day, become smaller, become nothing, no self.
It is the ultimate distillation of the emptying path.
So I want to pose this challenge directly to you as you step back into your life this week. Look closely at the specific situations causing you the most acute stress, resentment, or anxiety right now. Examine them under the light of what we've discussed.
Are those stressors absolute, objective realities threatening your survival?
Or are they simply rigid opinions, past identities, or brutal expectations you are exhausting yourself trying to protect? What is one incredibly important identity or one heavy, unrealistic expectation about how your life should look that you could simply choose to drop today?
Just open the palm of your hand and let it fall. It is an incredibly confronting yet liberating question to sit with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay observant of your own programming, and remember that when the backpack gets unbearably heavy and the friction of the world starts to burn, take a conscious breath, soften the physical resistance in your body, and simply remind yourself, it is what it is.